All right, great. Thanks everyone for joining me again here on Gaudium et Spes 22 podcast and YouTube video, both. And I'm always excited when I have guests. I get very excited for these interviews. But this is an interview like a few that I've had that has had a few cancellations along the way. So I'm really, really happy that it finally worked out. This is a Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. my time, Eastern time. And I'm excited about tonight's guest because I just told her off camera that even though we've never met in person, I feel like I actually know her since we've interacted on Facebook. But also we both live on farms and so on, and we both think the church is pretty screwed up, and so we have some things to say about that. But I'm talking about, and a lot of you know her, especially those of you who are my friends on Facebook, the one and the only, finally on my show, the Leticia Ochoa Adams. Leticia, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and Leticia has a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Holy Apostles Seminary in Connecticut. I knew some people that used to teach there, but all of a sudden I can't remember their names. But that's a good place. That's a quality place. I knew a lot of really good people that taught there. But before we get into her story, and it's a really interesting story, and so we want to unfold that. I want to plug her book, and for those who are viewing, here it is right here. But for those who are just listening on the podcast, it is Leticia Ochoa Adams, Our Lady of Hot Messes, Getting Real with God in Dive Bars. I love that. Dive Bars and Confessionals. I have the co-owner of our Catholic Worker Farm, Father John Gribowich, who is a priest, teaches out in San Francisco now. He's like basically freelancing as a priest now. But anyway, he now talks about his dive bar ministry. That's
I
his
love
thing.
it.
Dive bar ministry. But you have the reason why I wanted you on the show is mainly because I have a deep appreciation as a parent for the fact that you had a very traumatic experience happen to you about 5-6 years ago now, 2017, where your son Anthony committed suicide. And I have followed your comments about that on Facebook, and you talk about it in your book here very movingly. So I thought, well, not only do I like Leticia from a distance because we have this common back to the land Catholic farm rancher thing going, whatever you want to call it, and she's also very smart and funny and hard hitting. But I thought that she might have some really unique insights into suffering. I mean, I'm a parent myself. I only have one child, but I know there might be people out there listening who have had children that have committed suicide. Now, I don't want to necessarily lead off with that, but I want to just throw that out there. That's kind of the elephant in the living room. It's one of the main things that I want to talk about. But before we get to that, you just have this fascinating story, Leticia, your life story. So, and in the beginning of your book, you kind of go through your life story, the fact that you were sexually abused as a child, but that doesn't really define you. That as a child you were searching for love, and then that spilled over into your adult life, and that caused you to make all kinds of egregiously awful mistakes. So maybe for the viewers and the listeners, before we launch into deeper theological meditations and stuff, let's establish your bona fides as somebody that's actually been through the school of hard knocks, and you can give your life story here at the very beginning if you don't mind.
Yeah, I grew up. Well, I was born to a single mother first and foremost. I never knew my father. And so I was raised with my mom. It was just me and my mother, and had no siblings, which is really weird because you're just kind of alone in the world without a father, without parents. I mean, without siblings. And so I spent so much time by myself in rural Texas. I grew up in a small town of maybe 4,000 people. That's one of those towns where there's more cows than people. And so I was kind of just a weirdo because I spent so much time by myself. I was bullied in school because I didn't have a dad, and it was the 80s in a small rural conservative town. So when I was in the, I guess, first or second grade, I started making up stories that my dad was Kenny Rogers, and that's why he wasn't ever home. And I learned how to speak English listening to country music. So like that
Well,
also,
you have to stop there a second. Now, why of all people would you have picked? Well, I guess because it was the 80s, right? Kenny
yeah, it was the
Rogers,
Kenny
he,
Rogers was awesome.
yeah, he was like big in the 80s, right? Okay, so yeah,
Yes, he
that's
was a
true.
he was a major country singer. He was a major actor.
So you
And
got to
I
know when to hold him and fold him and all that stuff.
and just recently I watched one of his old movies, Wild Horses.
I saw that movie.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that movie impacted me way more than I remember. Like rewatching it as an adult, I was like, "Oh wow, that's probably why I like horses." There was a horse that used to graze in the 3 acres behind my house growing up, and I just got the idea. I begged my mother to buy a watermelon one day at the grocery store. She thought I wanted to eat it. And I started feeding it to this horse. And then before you knew it, I jumped on her back and was riding her around. And her owner came over to see if she was in our pasture. And my mom said, "Yeah, she's back there." And I think Letty, that's what my mom calls me, is, petting her. So they go back there in the field to look for me, and I'm riding this horse. And the owner was like, "Oh my God, get her off there. She is not a rideable horse. She bucks everybody off." And I'm just like laying on her back reading a book. Um, and after I was watching that movie with Kenny Rogers, I was like, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have Google to like, how do you
No,
break a
right.
horse? I just watched a Kenny
That's
Rogers
right.
movie and jumped on a horse, and I was 6 years old.
All
So
right,
yeah,
very good. So that's why you chose Kenny Rogers. So you began telling tall fibs at school in order to build yourself up.
yes, yeah, protect myself and also build myself up and make myself feel better. And then I began going to the Baptist church just to help me with my English because I didn't speak English at all. I only spoke Spanish. And at this point, the school had started talking to my mother about the fact that I understood English, but I was refusing to speak it. And so my mom had a daycare, and one of the moms of the kids that she took care of said, "I'll take her to the vacation Bible school and she can practice speaking English over the summer." And so that's what I did. And I just fell in love with the entire, to me, the Baptist church was a tiny nook in my world where everything was great. The people were nice. There were snacks. My mom was like raised as a poor Hispanic who started working in the fields when she was 4. My mother doesn't believe in snacks. So the Baptist church had snacks. They showed up 3 times a week. Everyone was so nice. There was moms, there was dads, there was sisters and brothers. Um,
So
and
there was
so
community.
yeah, there's a community that I didn't have anywhere
Yeah.
else. And so I I would ride my bike from the time I was 8 until I was 13. I rode my bike every Sunday, every Wednesday, um, to church. And the thing about Protestants, I love the Baptist church, and I owe them so much for teaching me about Jesus and teaching me that I'm loved and that Jesus died for me. But the prosperity gospel is real. And when you're a poor little girl with no dad, and your mom doesn't go to church with you, and you look around at all these families, and the sermons are constantly like, if you allow Jesus into your heart, then you'll have a good life and you'll be happy and you'll have everything you want. I mean, that's very difficult for a child to interpret for herself. I mean, I think it's hard for adults to interpret, honestly, but it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
difficult for me. Yeah.
So
And so then,
it was a version of the prosperity gospel where if Jesus comes into your life, all boo-boos are going to go away.
right, exactly. And as I got older, I was more aware of the things
Yeah.
that were hard about my life.
Well, you
The
say in your book too, and this fascinated me to talk, not to interrupt you
Yeah,
in
go
your
ahead.
life story, but with regard to your Baptist upbringing there, not that your mom brought you up, but you went to the Baptist church, is that you made these like multiple altar calls, and I can resonate with that because even though like you, I was baptized Catholic, I went through a whole evangelical phase when I was a teenager, and I just felt like I couldn't I couldn't, in a sense, commit myself to the Lord Jesus enough times. It's
Yeah.
just like over and over and over and over again. Lord Jesus, oh Lord, I'm so sorry for all that stuff I did yesterday, and now I commit myself to ye. All right, but
Over and over.
over and over and oh Lord, you know, in my heart, I'm totally sorry for that again.
And like no one had the sense. So it was so funny because so the pastor is named Pastor Wimpy and his wife was the secretary at the junior high. It was a small town. And no one had ever had the sense to think this child comes here every Sunday, every Wednesday by herself. She answers every altar call. I would stalk my pastor and ask him these difficult theological questions when I was like 10, you know, like I swear, Jesus, I have asked him into my heart, but he just doesn't seem to want to live there. Like you have a 12-year-old asking you these questions, you might want to call her parents, you know? And no one ever did. So it was just me wrestling with all of these questions and carrying my King James Bible to school. And I collected Chick tracts like crazy. And I mean, children just should not read those things.
No, not a chick track. I read them too. I read
But
them
I was
too.
addicted to I mean, they were great stories, right? Like,
Well, the death cookie. I realized
yes,
as a Catholic, I was eating the death cookie, or I think that's it.
my favorite one was when they called the Catholic Church, the Whore of Babylon. And
Oh
I
yeah.
remember I read it at the same time that John Paul II was in San Antonio, which was 30 minutes from my hometown. And so, I mean, it was a big deal. It was all over the news. And I'm reading this chick track about Catholicism being the whore of Babylon. First of all, I didn't even know what the word meant, but whatever. I was reading it and I was like, that's the leader of that church, the Antichrist. And I just remembered seeing his face and thinking, like, that's impossible, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
He don't
and
look like no Antichrist to me.
yeah, he was I don't know. Like, I don't know if I believe this. So I think that that was probably my first sense that maybe there was something not being told to
Right.
me. But
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I had a rough life, and then I was sexually abused at home for years from the time I was 5 until I was about 9. My mom was not, and is still not really a warm and fuzzy person. And there's so many reasons for that, but it does impact you as a child, especially an only child. So there's no one else to hug you and tell you they're proud of you and, kiss you on the cheek, stuff
So
like that.
let's stop there a second, because obviously this is a critical point in your life. The fact that you were sexually abused truly as a child, not as a post-pubescent adolescent, which is bad enough, but as a child, a real child between the ages of 5 and 9. You don't have to go into any details, obviously, but that I want what trauma did that cause in you? Because you talk about it a little bit in your book, and I really think that it's key to an
Yeah.
understanding of your depth of perception into the psychology of human suffering and the need for love and so on. So maybe you could elaborate on that just a little bit, the trauma.
Yeah. And the thing is that while it was happening and even after it stopped happening, I really didn't know what was happening. I had no one to really talk to about it. It was just I don't remember, like a lot of victims remember being told not to say anything. I don't remember that. I think it was just so normal in the house. And this man was such a predator that he didn't have to tell me, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it just seemed like you eat dinner and then you watch the news and then this happens while you're watching the news and your mom's cleaning the kitchen. So it was just kind of like one of those things. And so, but it was when I got older, and the youth minister started talking about sex outside of marriage, and then at school we were having these puberty talks, and so
Yeah.
then things started clicking for me, but not really, because no one gives you the vocabulary. And I really think that that's something everyone ought to think about, is when your kids start going to school and hearing about puberty and you know uh safe sex or whatever you want to talk about. You just never know what had happened. My mom didn't know. She had no idea. And she lived in the same house with this man and me. Um, so anyway, so it started giving, I started thinking about it. And then the youth minister said, if you've done any of these things, he did the whole bubble gum talk, where it's like, if you chew gum and you stick it to the wall, it's going to stick. And then if you take it off and stick it again, it's not going to stick, or whatever that stupid analogy is. And I was like, I'm used gum. Like, I'm just used gum. I already did all that, but I was abused. It wasn't the same. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so it really confused me a lot. But what it did teach me was that if I wanted to be cared for and I wanted to be hugged and loved and treated kindly, that sex was the way to do that, you know?
Yeah.
Doing things with boys was the way to do that. So, um, that's what I did. I was very promiscuous as a teen. I began running away. I was a target for a lot of pedophiles in my town. So when I was 14, I was sneaking out of the house with a 28-year-old
Yeah.
who is still in town, still in the town, and everyone knows that he would, you know, do that to junior high aged girls, and no one ever thought he's just the weirdo. He's just that guy.
That's the
And
way it used to be dealt with. Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's just that pervert. No, it
yeah,
never crossed anybody's mind. Well, he ought to be in jail.
yeah,
That kind of thing. I mean, when I was growing up too in the 60s and 70s, it was the same. I was never sexually abused, but you'd hear rumors, especially of little girls that had been abused by their uncle, their stepdad, or their biological father, or just a friend of the family. And no, nothing ever happened to these men. It seemed to
yeah,
me. It just seemed like, oh yeah, that's that pervert down the road. You want to keep your little sister away from him, but nobody did anything. So it sounds like,
yeah.
your small town in Texas was like my town, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah, and then the responsibility became on me, because once I started sleeping in class and it was like, oh, she's sneaking out of the house and going with so and so, then it's like, oh, you're one of those girls. You're one of the fast girls. And it's like, no, I'm one of his victims. Like, now as an adult, I can see that, right? But as a
Yeah.
kid, I thought he
Yeah.
loved me. I thought whatever. So yeah, and then it just caused me to be even more bullied in junior high, because then all the other girls get to call you names, and oh, I mean, it was really awful experience. And um but my sixth grade year, a boy came to school and he looked just like Donnie Wahlberg, and I fell in love with him, and I would chase him around and tell him he was going to marry me. And he said, no, I'm not. Please leave me alone, weirdo. And stuff like that. And then eventually we did end up going out for a little while. It broke up with me, went out with my best friend. And then we lost touch for 17 years. And when he was in Iraq, he found me on MySpace. And now he's my husband. And I mean,
Your
there's so
husband,
much story there.
Stacy. Yeah.
Yeah, my
I
husband,
feel like I know
Stacy.
Stacy too, even though I never met him, because you're always telling Stacy stories. But what's very clear that comes out in your book is that and the reason why I think it's important, I think it's very common, and not just then, but now, maybe even more so now, is what you were really looking for was love.
Yes.
What you were looking for was a real relationship with a real person that would care for you and love you, and you could do the same for them. But that in the categories of your mind, that simply involved having sex with people,
Yeah.
that's the and because that was your image of what men wanted. And apparently a lot of the men that is what they wanted,
Right,
right?
exactly. It was just confirmed over and over and over to me. The only person who didn't treat me that way was Stacy. That's why he broke up with me. Went out with my best friend who was, whatever. But
Yeah.
so yeah, he was the only person that didn't treat me that way. And these boys would just confirm it, boys, men, I mean everyone. And then I got pregnant when I was 16 with my oldest son Anthony, and I just remember sitting in the doctor's office waiting for the pregnancy test to come back. And I already knew I was pregnant. I had taken 6 pregnancy tests by that time. I was 16. I wasn't about to tell my mother and risk my life like that unless I was positive. But still,
Yeah.
she took me to the doctor, of course. And so I was sitting there and I just thought, like, finally, I won't be alone. So the same ache that I was trying to soothe with promiscuity, I also felt was soothed with my first pregnancy, even though I was 16 and had no resources to raise this child. But that's what it always was this, um,
Yeah.
yeah, this wound that just festered.
And what year was that?
That was 1994.
1994.
It was
Okay. And
1993 when I got pregnant, 1994 when he was born.
all right. So we're going to come back to Anthony. Obviously, that's a huge part here. But let's okay. So you've established you know the trajectory of your early life. What led you back to the Catholic faith?
Uh, um, you
You were
know,
in Rome. There was a sheep story.
yeah,
I raise sheep. That's why I have to have you talk about this, okay?
I
Because it
mean,
involves my two favorite places, Italy and sheep. So there you
I
go.
love I yeah, so I first I so Stacy and I lived together and he said if we ever get married I'll have to be in the Catholic Church because I swear and he will deny this, he still denies this story. He says that I'm making it up. But he thought I was not going to take RCIA classes because I thought Catholics were insane. But he doesn't know me and I'm very stubborn. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take RCIA classes, get the rest of my sacraments. I was baptized as a baby. Um and so when he was in Iraq, he asked, where do you want to go if you could go anywhere in the world? And I was like, Rome, because I want a pair of Roman red shoes. Like I just wanted to buy a pair of red heels in Rome. I had no intention
I
of
bought
going to
some
the
shoes in
Vatican.
Rome too. I plead guilty to that. Near the Spanish Steps, a great pair of
That's exactly
shoes.
right. Anyway, so yes, I bought mine too. Um, so as we're living together, I'm already starting RCA classes. He is in Iraq, no, Afghanistan. Sorry, he's in Afghanistan. So he has to plan an R&R. We go to Rome, and when we get there, he asks, "What do you want to see?" Father Jonathan, who was the priest who walked with me through my conversion, had been talking about sheep, and he said sheep are dumb. Like when
They are
Jesus,
stupid.
yeah, when Jesus calls us sheep, he is not telling us loving thing. He's telling us we're stupid.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
so we got to Rome. At the time, I didn't know there were sheep herds in Texas, but it doesn't count because I wanted, you know, old sheep and old shepherds. And that's what
Old
I got.
world. You wanted the whole old world shepherd experience. Yes.
Yeah. So we're walking down the street. It's called Ampia Antica, I think is how you say it. And it's the road that Saint Peter walked. Peter, yes. Paul. I don't know. Paul, maybe. I don't know. One of them.
One of
I
those
used to
two
know
big
this story.
apostles were on this
one,
road near
one
Rome.
of those guys, that was Peter,
Yeah.
actually. And he's walking down the road and he sees Jesus and Jesus tells him to go back. Um,
Oh yeah,
and
Quo Vadis. Yeah,
yes,
yeah. Where are you going? Yes.
yes, where are
Yes.
you going? Exactly. And so I'm thinking about this the whole time we're walking down this cobblestone road, and there's these kids on bikes, and there's all this stuff happening. And over on the side of the road, I start seeing this like white thing, and I was like, what is that? And as it got closer, I could see it was a herd of sheep. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. There's a herd of sheep coming down this road. And behind them, I mean, there was probably 50 sheep. And behind them was this old shepherd. I mean, he was old. His skin was olive, suntan, like, sun burnt, I guess is what you would
Yeah.
call it. Um, and he just had this little smirk on his face. And he wore this satchel. He had a wood staff. And I was just like, this guy just came out of a time warp. It was everything I wanted. But the sheep were so happy. They were free, they were playful, they weren't scared. They walked right through me and my husband. At one point, we're both standing there and there's just sheep all around us, and they had no cares in the world. And I remember just feeling like God was saying, there's nothing I won't give you. Like nothing. There's nothing. You can ask for a herd of sheep on a random Roman road and I'll give it to you. Um, that's how much I love you. And it also was such a great example of why Jesus is our shepherd because we're dumb. and the way to be
Yeah.
happy and the way to be free and the way to be safe is with him. Um, and that's when I converted, really. I was like
Yeah.
2 weeks away. I was 2 weeks away from getting confirmed and I barely
And
converted.
that's when you really converted. I think a sheep's brain is the size of a walnut, maybe even smaller. We have both sheep and goats, so the biblical
Oh,
motif here plays out on our
yes.
farm very much. And I never quite understood why goats have taken it on the chin in the biblical imagery as the bad guys, because my wife prefers the sheep. I prefer the goats. The goats know their names like dogs. They have personality. They're rambunctious. They're inquisitive. They're very people oriented, and they're smart. They're very smart and inquisitive animals. Whereas sheep, they're like cookie cutter. I mean, one sheep is exactly the same as another one. They're like a field of daisies that all look alike, and they're equally stupid. And they really do need, in other words, a shepherd.
Yeah.
Some of you may have seen my dog. Well, he's a border collie, and he loves to run around the sheep because they need that.
Yeah.
You know, and so you're right. I mean, I think that's a very interesting insight with regard to sheep, and only somebody that's actually encountered real sheep knows that when Jesus calls us sheep and calls himself a shepherd in the New Testament, what he means by that is you people really, really need me.
Yeah. Without me, you're so lost.
Yes, your souls are the size of a walnut, and
And
you need
also, and
and
also
you
just
need
like
me.
you get picked off. You get picked off by
Oh
all
yeah,
kinds of stuff.
everything. Yeah, yeah. A goat, a coyote walks up to a goat, and the goat goes, "What you talking about, Willis? You're not coming near me. I'm going to take you down." A sheep just will roll over and like, okay, I'm dead.
All right.
Okay, eat me, just eat me here. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
exactly.
we're easy. So what Jesus is saying is it's easy for Satan to pluck us out.
Yeah, exactly. And not and by simple means, nothing difficult.
That's right. It doesn't require some Rube Goldberg device of,
I know. I think
it's
it's
just
so
very
funny.
simple. Here's
I
a
think it's
carrot. Oh, boom.
exactly. I think it's hilarious when people are so
Yeah,
fascinated with spiritual warfare. And I'm like, dude, it's just not that scary. It's not scary and exercise, like
yeah.
exorcism. It's so simple. It's like, here's this really nice car. You want it? Ignore your family and work overtime. Woo!
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So when Satan says you want a carrot, you say, no, go away. It's it's
Exactly.
it's kind of that it's kind of that simple, but we are sheep, and so we complicate things. So anyway, you convert to Catholicism, and you marry Stacy, and then what?
And then it was supposed to be, happily ever after. We bought a brick home, a two-story brick home. When my uncle saw it for the first time, he had tears in his eyes and he said, "I'm so proud of you." And I just was on cloud nine because I'd never heard those words from anyone. And my uncle was like my dad. Um, and so he owned our own pest control business. We lived in a brick home. My kids went to safe suburban schools. We had a lawn. We had trees. It was the American dream.
Hey, can we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, a little bit here. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No
and I want
problem.
to come back to your American dream. But with regard to your conversion to Catholicism, it just suddenly popped into my brain. Okay, we were talking about the sheep and the Roman experience, and Stacy wanted you to become a Catholic. But you didn't become a Catholic, did you? Just to please Stacy, or did you at that time? But was there a deeper reason than, oh, I want to please this guy? And because you could have found the love of Jesus as a Baptist still. It's not like Baptists don't talk about Jesus the shepherd, right?
Yeah, I could have, but he specifically said in the Catholic Church. But on that road, when I saw, and it was so that was my conversion. The next day, Stacy and I went onto the Holy Stairs, which is the stairs that Jesus
Right.
walked to get to Pilate. And Stace at the bottom of the stairs says, "I'm not going up that thing on my knees." Oh, excuse me. And I was like, "This is the only way to go up there. So you can go up the stairs, but this is the way I'm going." So he goes and halfway up, he looks down and he says, "Oh my God, I see it." And I was like, "You see what?" And he says, "I see the blood. I see the blood of Jesus." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "There's a spot right here." And they have these glass things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the guy next to him said, "Yeah, it's right there. Like you can see it." I was like, "Okay." So I just kept going. I followed him behind. I followed behind him when we got up. He had tears streaming down his face and he was like, "Yeah, we're going to be Catholic. We're going to do what we have to do. We're going to get married in the church, blah blah blah." And not
That,
blah blah blah, but like,
but that's fascinating to me because it's so easy to poo-poo stories like that, right? And
yeah.
academics often do, like, oh, you don't know whose blood that was, and maybe that was just a piece of red paint from some renovations and all that. But the fact is, if those stairs really were the stairs that Christ climbed to, there is a chance that that blood really was Christ. But even beyond that, it nevertheless is it's the tactile, tangible, sacramental nature of
Yeah.
Catholicism. That's what leaps out at me from that story. That what
And it
you're,
happens mine and then his.
yeah,
Um and the night before, because we shared a hotel room and I already knew better, but because I was already going through RCIA classes, I had already had my first confession. I was like, man, I'm so screwed. I'm gonna have to go to confession again. I went to confession in the Vatican the next day, and in the confessional, I mean, the priest was so funny. He's like, "Have you killed anyone? No. Have you had an abortion? No." He's like, "Okay, you're fine." And I was like, "What is happening in this city? Like, this is wild." But
love this city, love the priests in this city. Unless I murdered someone or committed adultery or had an abortion, I'm good to
I'm
go.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And so as I'm saying my penance, in front of the tomb of John Paul II, I said to God, like, "You're gonna have to help with him because I'm good and I plan on being Catholic, like really Catholic, but you have to do something about that man because I have no control over him." And the next day was when we went to the stairs and that happened. And everything changed from there. Like he took a catechism, like I had my catechism with me and he took it with him back to Afghanistan to read it. um I got confirmed, my kids were baptized, and we were planning on getting married as soon as he got home.
that's great.
Yeah,
Okay, so now we know more. And since Rome is my favorite city in the whole world, and I wish I lived there, and I think
I
most of
do
my
too.
readers and viewers know that I would love to have the monetary means to retire in Rome. By the way, this ministry of mine is now nonprofit, so if you want to send me $1 million so I can retire, feel free. But anyway, and it is. But anyway, I'm not actually solicit. I never solicit money. Uh, so okay, so now you have the perfect brick house, and for those watching, some why are we spending so much time on her story is important. That's why I wanted you on the show, because your story is not atypical of so many other people. And what interests me about your story so much is that it is God writing straight with crooked lines, which is exactly what he does with everybody. And it comes out so well in your book. And by the way, before we get to the fact that you've got this perfect now brick house and where we go from there, I I do recall reading one review of yours somewhere of the book saying, and I think this is a criticism that you dealt with at some point on Facebook as well, because I think you mentioned it, that oh, Leticia just likes basically to wallow in, look at me, I'm the most screwed up human being who ever lived, and isn't that grand? It's a kind of sort of hipster suffering or something like that. I don't know what they called it and that sort of thing, but I just think that is such a gross and unfair criticism of what you're about here, because you're not holding up your life and saying, look how cool this was. You're holding up your life and saying, look how screwed up this was, and here's
Yeah,
why, and
yeah,
here's why. But anyway, I digress. But if you can comment on that and then go on to your perfect brick house.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that there I can see how that is a thing that happens nowadays with social media and blogs and whatever, is that people do tend to see themselves as victims or
Yeah,
reject victim and say survivor. And all I want to do is show the picture of you can be an actual person with actually screwed up stuff happening to you, and making bad choices. Like both things are true at the same time.
that's right.
Things that you
This
couldn't
isn't victim
control.
porn, not victim
Yeah,
porn at all.
yeah, exactly. And how um I think about Heather King a lot, and how Heather King writes, as a person who sees where God was, even if you didn't see him there at the time. But in reflection, you can see where he was there with you. At the time, you
Yeah,
couldn't see it, right?
that's right. You
And so,
don't see it then, you see it later.
yeah, you don't see it then, you see it later. Exactly. And it doesn't look like this fairy in the sky either. It looks like a man, not a man, but it looks like a god who gives you a herd of sheep in the middle of Rome when really you could have used like the light bill
Yeah.
getting paid. You know what I mean? Like God's
Well, yeah.
concerns are so different than our concerns. It's radical, actually.
Yeah. It's so true. And the thing is, we don't know it until it's retrospect, sometimes long in retrospect. But anyway,
Yeah,
okay, so I didn't plan the interview to go like this, but it's really working out great, where we're sort of teasing out the points we want to make as we go through your life, which is really what your book is, which is
yeah.
why it's great. So now we're at the stage of you're married, you're Catholic, you've got this great like suburban life going on, and then go on from there.
And my conversion is a great story, and my blog is just getting all this traffic, and I'm protesting Planned Parenthood, and I'm just this great Republican Catholic living in the suburbs, going to PTA meetings. And it's like, yeah, I'm just rocking and rolling. I'm a great Catholic. I'm tooting my own horn. Look at me. Look what God's done for me. It's so great. It's so fantastic. And of course, at some point you have to fall off the horse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. Like my marriage started getting rocky. There's still problems, and I just thought, like, why is there problems? I'm praying novenas, I pray my rosary, I had a holy hour that was like on the books. So it's this Catholic
So this
prosperity
is like the
gospel.
Catholic. I was just going to say it's like the Catholic prosperity gospel.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Where you think you've checked all the boxes, you go to daily mass, you have a holy hour, blah blah blah, everything's supposed to be great. And it wasn't great. It was, and it just got worse and worse. My husband's best friend who worked for us died suddenly. That hit everyone really hard. Then my husband lost his dad, and then lost his mother, and then his dad. And then my uncle in 2016, my uncle, who's like a father to me, was like a father to Anthony. He died.
Yeah, you talk about that. You talk about your uncle a lot in the book. He was key in like your redemption, really, as a child.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah. He was
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Like he did,
So you lost
he
someone really powerfully important to you as a kind of almost a savior figure in your life.
Yes, he was the strongest man. He was my hero. He was the strongest man I ever knew. And I sat next to his bed for 7 days before he passed away, and watched him deteriorate. And they took the life support off of him. They expected him to pass within minutes. And instead, he lived all night long. He woke up in the morning and asked to call his wife. And he told her he loved her. And then he went back into a coma, and he
Wow.
he came out of a coma to tell her that he loved her. Um,
Wow.
that's
You
how
know,
strong he was.
and that sort of thing happens. Talk to anybody who works in hospice and they will tell
Yeah,
you
yeah. And
that
so
sort of thing really happens a lot, actually.
yeah, I I held his hand. I told him I loved him. I thanked him for everything he did for me. And it wasn't a peaceful death. It was very traumatic to watch him go through that. But I did it because he did a lot for me. And I feel like it was still a gift for me to be next to him. Then 10 months later, his wife, same thing. I sat with her for 14 days before she passed away. And it devastated my son, who spent every summer with them from the time he was 8 until he was an adult. The whole summer too. If I wanted to see him during the summer, I had to go down home to see
So
him.
you're
And
talking about Anthony now.
yeah,
That so that when your uncle passed, it wasn't just traumatic for you, but it was very traumatic for Anthony.
Yeah, and Anthony had never really seen anyone at the end of their life. So when he saw, before he went on life support, he went to go visit my uncle, and my uncle was standing up, talking, joking, drinking coffee. And I tried to prepare Anthony for, yes, that happens. They get a sudden burst of energy,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean he's not as sick as I am telling you he is. But Anthony was young and he didn't know, so he left. He didn't stay. So he felt very guilty about that. And then when my aunt passed away 10 months later, he felt really awful about that. And a month later, to the day of my aunt passing away, Anthony died by suicide. So he committed suicide in our home while I was doing homework. I was reading theology of the body, writing a paper. Um, Actually, he was already gone. I was looking for him and I was doing homework, and he was already gone in the garage for hours, and I didn't know. Um,
You had actually gone to Chick-fil-A.
yeah, I went to go pick up my second oldest, Daniel, from work. While I was sitting in the parking lot, Anthony called. He asked, "Can I use your car?" I said, "Yeah, where are you going?" And he was like, "I want to go up to the parish and talk to Father," which the parish was maybe 3 miles from our house. I said, "Yeah, as soon as I get home, you can take my car." And I told him, if Father Dean, who's our pastor, said, if Father Dean's not there, just ask for Father Francisco. It should be easy because they have the same name. Anthony's first name was Francisco. And so me and Dan went to Chick-fil-A. Uh, and when we got home, Anthony was nowhere to be found. And I just assumed he went walking because it wasn't that
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assumed he went walking, started doing my homework. I actually looked for him all over the house, and I told Daniel, look in your closet. I mean, and Dan's like, why would I look in my closet? And I said, I don't know, like maybe he did something stupid. And Dan's like, no, he probably just went to walk to the parish. And I was like, or went for a walk. And I was like, yeah, probably to the parish. And at 4:32, my husband walked into the garage to turn off the light because the light was on in there, and he found Anthony. So yeah.
I can't even imagine. And that's only been 5 years, um, five
Yeah.
years ago. And I can still hear the pain in you telling that story. Kind of chokes me up too, as a parent, um, to actually go through that. And talk a little bit, talk a little bit about then. I mean, we've all known people that we love, like your uncle and so forth, who die, and you grieve. What is the difference between grief when someone you know dies a natural way and losing a child to suicide?
Yeah.
What kind of grief does that create? I don't know, and I don't ever want to know.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't wish it on my worst enemy, honestly. But I with my uncle, I think as a kid growing up, especially as a Hispanic, we go to funeral masses. I mean, we have open casket funerals, and it doesn't matter how old you are, you're going to that funeral. It's just a matter of respect. It's a matter of life. So when I was 3 years old, I went to my grandfather's funeral. And then I went to my grandmother's funeral. So losing my uncle, at some point in your life, you just realize these people are gonna go. Like you see your mom and your aunts and your uncles saying goodbye to their aunts and uncles and their parents, and
yeah,
um and so you realize this is the way life goes, and eventually I'm gonna lose these people. And that's how I had the uh that's how I had the ability to sit with them, because I had been
yeah,
prepared for this. With Anthony, it was such a blind side because he was my kid, but also because it was a suicide. And so Anthony comes with a whole bunch of what ifs, what could I have done? A lot of I spent months and months putting to people. That's why I know exactly where I was when he died, because I went back and did like this investigation of where was I when what time was this? What time did that happen? What time did the call come in? Um,
yeah,
and this
yeah,
magical thinking that if you could just find the answer, all of this will be reversed.
yeah,
It also came with such a fear for my other kids. Um, a terror, actually, I lived with for 2 years at least, of where are my kids? Like, where, if I didn't hear from one of my other children, like, where are you? What are you doing? Like, are you okay? Are you alive? And I had said that to them so long. Like, I would text them, are you alive? And then that day I texted Anthony, like, where are you? Are you alive? And he wasn't. So that was like a trauma. And there's just all these little traumas within this big trauma. And
Yeah. Yeah.
my brain just didn't want, my brain just couldn't piece it all together. And then I just naturally, my entire life, reacted to hardship and to suffering with anger, as a defense of so many things. Um, and so when I became a chronic runaway, I mean, it was just all rooted in anger. It was just rage that would tell me, like, I would just rage and then leave. Like, my mom would be, I'm going to call the police. I'm like, throwing up middle fingers. Like, do it. I mean, it didn't help that I was listening to like Metallica and, but Rage Against the Machine, of course, that's the generation I come from too. So maybe that has something
Yeah.
to do with it. But yeah, so I was so angry, and like people still will say they saw me at mass and they saw me at confession and they saw me at all these places, and they don't realize like I was Catholic enough to know where to find the man I was angry at in the sacraments, you
Okay,
know?
so this is kind of what I want to zero in on here is, in your whole story here, because this is what your book is about, is what does this do to your faith? What does it do to your vision of God? I know that my mother, father as well, I lost a sister, not to suicide, but she died of a congenital heart defect when she was 5 years old after unsuccessful surgery, and she lingered in great suffering. And we all loved her dearly, and it was a great trauma because we believed that science was going to save her, and it didn't. But I do remember that my mother did not go to church for 2 years, and she didn't believe in God, but she was just so pissed at him
Yeah.
that she just couldn't bring herself to pay any homage to him. For a while, God had just become to her like a just great masochist in the sky who had inflicted this enormous, unbearable pain upon her. And her child died a natural death of natural defects. Your son died at his own hand. And I can't even begin to imagine how angry you must have been at
I was
God.
so angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at Anthony. And that's something that in secular suicide loss circles, I don't think people are free enough to say, because people think, oh, you were angry at him, you should have compassion for him. I have compassion for him, but I'm also angry. This is a significant harm he did to his family, no matter what his reasoning was. I know his reasoning was not to hurt us, but isn't that what sin is? No one
Yeah,
sins, and I mean, well, I guess some real jerks really do sin intentionally to hurt people, but for the most part, most of us
yeah,
walking
yeah,
around on the earth don't intend to
yeah,
hurt anyone. We just fail
yeah,
to love.
yeah,
And so that's what this was. So I spent a lot of time explaining to people that yes, his suicide was still a sin, not because his culpability was damnable. I don't know that. That's God's job, not mine, but because it caused significant harm, and that harm still needs reparation. Um, which is
yeah,
why I love being Catholic, because that's the only time purgatory ever made sense to me. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and and
True.
my priest wrote, he said, I wrote my master's thesis on purgatory, and it was all just a bunch of BS, because now I understand what it actually is, because I know Anthony and I know he would do anything to fix this. Um, and so yeah, I would,
Now that he sees clearly where
yeah,
he is,
yeah,
and now he is in a place where he is making amends and fixing it.
yeah, exactly. And we could go into my like own theory of what hell is. I think that's when you have to fix it and you don't want to still, because
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
because it involves the unveiling of secrets that you don't want to unveil. But I've
exactly.
always thought purgatory was kind of like, in some ways, analogous to Hindu reincarnation, where
Yeah,
essentially you're working off your karmic faults through various reincarnations, so
yeah.
uh,
And
yeah,
as a mom, I just thought like he's freaking grounded. You know,
You're grounded. You're in
You're
purgatory, grounded.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it made so much sense to me. It's like, yeah, he's grounded. Exactly. Yeah,
So you were
exactly.
you were angry at Anthony, but there must have also, I mean, he didn't leave a note, right? He didn't
Right.
leave any. So you obviously were, because you write in your book as well about how when you were a young mother, you felt like you neglected your children
Yeah.
because you were doing double shifts, waiting tables, bartending, this sorts of, and it was your greatest regret as a parent was that you didn't real. And then when you became a Catholic, you were like running off to the crisis pregnancy center to, there's somebody in a crisis, so get kids, get dinner yourself, kids. Uh,
Yeah.
so did that create any I'm trying to avoid the word guilt because
But
that's
it
so
was guilt.
cliche.
It was
Yeah.
so bad and it was so awful. And yes, all of those memories. I mean, the first night, so Anthony died on Wednesday. We found him at 4:32. By the time everything was done, it was probably like 11 by the time all my kids finally got to bed and everything. And I stayed up for 2 solid days. I did not sleep for 2 days. And that's all I did for those 2 days was think about every mistake I made as a mother, vividly. One of the hardest ones was when I had a postpartum depression mental break, and I left my children with their father and I walked off and got on a bus and went to a hotel for 2 days. And Anthony was in the car yelling for me. And I mean, that's why I couldn't sleep because um,
Yeah.
it was like I abandoned him. And every time I was about to fall asleep, all I could hear was him screaming for me. Um, yeah, so the guilt was tremendous. It was awful. It was the worst thing ever. I mean, I condemned myself first before anything else. But a lot of people think like as a Catholic, you probably thought he was in hell or that's what you were concerned. My concern wasn't for him. I felt like God knows
No.
he's fine. He's a great kid. He's a great person. My concern was for myself. Like I was condemning myself. I was too busy doing that.
No.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
and you
so it's
wonder, you're not so concerned with your, you are concerned with your child's spiritual state, obviously, but you have great faith in God's mercy and infinite love. And
yeah.
you have a great line in your book. Oh gosh, where is it? That it's something about, oh, it's something about that you have to love a God that you have entrusted your child's soul to.
Yeah, that's the thing is that in the end of all my anger, because that was another thing, like things break here all the time. Things break in my house, things broke in I mean, all the time. My car breaks down, the washer starts spewing water everywhere, the
Yeah.
dishwasher
Yeah.
freaks. And it's like this one time, this one piece of the house couldn't break, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, under his weight or whatever. Like this,
Yeah. The
like there
rope
just
couldn't have snapped or something. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Or a
like
belt or whatever. Yeah.
there happened to be a belt on the washer. There happened to be a stool in the garage. There happened to be no one
Yeah.
home. Like all these things that worked out perfectly for this horrible thing to happen, and nothing really worked out perfectly. Like even right now, I have to go get my charger for
Well, this is, yeah, this is the problem of evil, right? Somebody
yeah,
dies in a car accident is a wonderful person. Why couldn't Hitler have died in a car accident?
right.
You mean God, you can't arrange to have had Hitler die in a motorcycle crash when he was 18 or something? Come on. Or
Yeah,
shot in World War One. I mean, he's in World War One. Bullet in the
yeah.
head.
Or
All
just
right, come on, Lord.
any like or choke on a steak. Like any amount of just like random things
Yeah,
can
yeah.
happen to normal
Or
people.
fall into a sewer and drown or something or other. Yeah, something hideous. All right.
Yeah.
And we're
Hang on
making
one
light of
second.
a serious. Well, go ahead.
Hang on one second. Let me go get my charger and my computer.
Oh
Just
yeah,
said,
absolutely. We will,
okay,
and I'm go ahead because
okay,
I'm
hang
going to. Yeah, no problem. I'll keep talking here.
on.
Uh, because the problem of evil so somebody was asking me what is it you drink on when you're drinking on these videos. Well, I'm going
Yeah,
to
what
tell you
is it?
it's Jim Beam Black Extra Aged. There we go. That's my
Nice.
that's my drink of choice this evening, and I highly recommend it. It's a little more expensive than regular Jim Beam, uh, but it is I think worth the price. But anyway, I loved that line in your book about that you have to trust and love a God that you've just entrusted your child's soul to.
Exactly. And that's really how I came back was,
Yeah. I
I
think
went
that's what
to,
brought my mother back too, was eventually just realizing my child is with this God. And
yeah,
so I know that this God loves my child more than I did, and I know how much I love my child. So I know my child is somewhere good.
yeah, exactly. And just, I mean, in all of my life, I never left with my children with anyone I didn't trust because of what happened to me as a child. So, I had no choice but to understand that this is where Anthony is and I have to get to know him, right?
But there I have to admit, I started to cry when I was reading this part of your book. Um, and one of the reasons why I'm dwelling on this is there might be people watching this. Thousands of people watch these videos. There might be somebody watching this who's a parent who's lost a child to suicide, and you describe in your book a scene where uh, after Anthony committed suicide, you went to clean a plate that had leftover meatloaf on it
Yeah.
that Anthony had not finished eating. How I don't know if I would have ever. I think I would have varnished that meatloaf and encased it in, to just. I know it was just such a poignant, tangible scene to me of washing a plate that had my deceased child's food on it. Would have
Yeah.
been really hard to do.
And and again, that's where my anger comes in. I was so angry. He was still in the garage too. Like I was talking to a police officer as I was cleaning that off, and I remembered looking at that officer and just saying, "Isn't this just so stupid? Like it's just so stupid." And and yeah, I still can't. I have not made meatloaf since. It's like I don't even I
Yeah,
haven't made it. Yeah.
yeah,
Um
I wouldn't either. So if you, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, and if you feel uncomfortable doing this, feel free to say no. But in the off chance there are parents who have lost children to suicide out there who are grieving right now, what would you say to them right now?
Um, honestly, the thing that I always say is you have every right to feel whatever you feel. Anger,
Good point.
um, disappointment. I mean, everything. Because you think it's hard when you give birth to a kid and you're like, this kid's gonna be a doctor, and then they don't become a doctor. It's really hard whenever they take their own life and you're like, never saw that coming. Like no one sees that coming. So you have every right to feel what you feel. And my greatest suggestion always is to tell God that. He already knows. Um, he already knows how we feel. He knows everything. So just go to him and tell him. He could take it, whatever it is. I didn't take communion for 9 months, I think, after Anthony's suicide. And I would walk up and I would say, "You're a jerk." I would walk up in my head, obviously, because I didn't want to
Yeah,
freak out anyone. Um,
yeah.
but like I didn't take communion, but I sure would walk up to him and tell him you're a jerk. So I think, people have the right idea and compassion for our loved ones who take their own lives. We can have compassion and still be angry. And as parents, we get to be all of those things. And I think honesty is what has led me to where I am right now. If I had been dishonest with myself, with others, I think I would have probably followed in Anthony's footsteps. Um,
Hmm.
because I honestly
Yeah.
really and truly believe that that's what contributed to Anthony's suicide more than anything else was the fact that he did not feel like he could be honest about anything, what he was struggling with, what he was
That's
going
interesting.
through. Yeah,
That's interesting that he couldn't be honest with whom, with anyone
himself,
else, with
yeah,
himself.
with himself, with anyone else, with God, with his fiance. That whole idea of I just need to push through. Like, okay, hustle. I gotta just push through, gotta keep going. I just gotta get through this and that. And you kind of
Yeah.
just shove all of those feelings down. they don't go anywhere. And eventually, for me, eventually you can feel suffocated by them, you know? And then at that point, you're so far deep down in this hole. It's like, where do I even begin to tell people whatever it is, that I struggle with
Yeah.
this, that I have these thoughts, that I want to, kill myself, that I've Googled, that you know what I'm saying? At some
Oh
point, it's
yeah.
so
Yeah.
overwhelming,
Maybe that's why he
that,
wanted to talk to the priest right before he
yeah.
killed himself.
Yeah, I mean, he had called a therapist all morning long and no one answered. But so yeah, I think he was seeking out someone to talk to, but he didn't know how. It's kind of back to like going to me being a kid and hearing all these things about sex and sex outside of marriage and sex being a sin, and me not being able to have the sense of what happened to me was abuse. Like I could see the commonality, but I couldn't see it was abuse, and I didn't have the vocabulary to say I was abused. I think Anthony at that point didn't really have the vocabulary to say, I am thinking of killing myself today, you know? And so I think
Right.
that that's what I'm saying. It's like we have to get to a place where we can be honest, um, about our own story, so then someone else can gain that vocabulary, can gain the insight of like, oh yeah, I felt that, because I think so many times I also think like we think suicidal ideation is a plan in our head of how we're going to end our life, and sometimes it is, I want to go into a coma and never wake up. That is a way of thinking of not existing,
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah.
That you would consider a sort of sleep, a dreamless sleep, is preferable to uh,
Yeah.
the pain that you're feeling.
And I also
Yeah.
feel like in this culture today, we don't teach our kids coping skills on how to cope through suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
go ahead.
is no, but this is what I think is really, really profoundly important about your story, not just about the grief that you went through, but from the other end, from the fact that I mean, suicide is an epidemic right now among
Yeah,
young people, and it's a it's a crisis of meaning. So it's a spiritual crisis, but it's also a psychological crisis caused by an infantilizing. Our culture infantilizes children, and it makes it impossible for them to truly develop the interpersonal skills they need to be on. Like it was so interesting to me when you said that Anthony lost the ability to be honest with himself and with others. I don't think young people today know how to truly engage their own feelings in an honest way.
right. And no one's helping them because there's
No.
this huge need to affirm. And while I
Yes.
am wholeheartedly into loving your children, love your kids, love them to death, but so much affirmation doesn't teach them self-reflection. It doesn't teach
Right.
them to examine, is this real? Is this really how I feel? Or is this how I feel today? Or is it something that I was influenced? And that's the thing. I think about how all these people on social media are called influencers and how many there are and how many different social media platforms there are with all these people influencing. And it's
Yeah.
like, who are they influencing? And why are we all so influenceable? Is that, I think I made that word up,
Well,
but
well, yeah. And I don't want to drag the culture wars into this because I don't want this to be a culture war discussion. But I just think that, for example, I have a daughter, and if my daughter had come to me at age 13 and says, "Dad, I think I'm a man," the last thing in the world I would have done is say, "Well, let's go get some surgery and have your breast cut off."
yeah, and
In
that's
other words,
my,
I would have taught her to let's be more honest about what's really going on here,
yeah,
and
let's
not
find out
just
what's going on.
right.
And now you can't, even if you are that parent, then there is a whole entire group of people who take your child aside and affirm them, and you're not a part of that. And so it's just all this other influence on everyone, and it would be so easy to say that it's this side or that side, like you're saying, like the culture wars. But to me, it's like I look at it, the whole picture, and I see how we're all just so easily influenced by an article or a meme
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
that's what I love about I see
yeah.
you write your blog post and you're always saying like this is a long one. And I'm like, thank God, like someone with some long thoughts and not these like
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. I haven't. I'm in the middle of another long blog post. I haven't because I write for Catholic World Report. You know the drill because you're a
yeah.
freelance Catholic writer. It takes up all your time. So I'm not writing these long 5,000 to 6,000 word blog posts like I did when I first started my blog, but I still write them occasionally, and I still get emails from me. It's too long. I mean, it takes you 10 minutes to read 5,000 words. 10 minutes is too long. Anyway, so
But
yeah,
it's our attention span. Our attention span
yeah,
is like likes, shares, follows, likes, shares, follows.
bing,
And
bing, bing.
and that is not conducive to being a Catholic. I'm so sorry. Like everyone's like, what's going on with the church? Like everyone is you cannot be a Catholic and have the attention span of a gnat. You just cannot. You cannot, you know?
Yeah,
Um
yeah, yeah. I agree.
and yeah,
All right, so let's segue then. Now it's okay. So I could talk to you for like 10 hours, Leticia. I
I
love
feel
you.
like I can
I
too.
I absolutely love you. And I really want to plug your book again, Our Lady of Hot Messes, because it's just accessible to everybody and yet profound. And that's the best kind of book. Accessible, but also deeply profound. And I think it is deeply profound, and it has a message I think a lot of people need to hear. But let's move on from your personal story and let's talk about the church, because before we went on the air, I said let's talk about what the well, I use stronger language, but I said what the hell's wrong with the church today? Okay. So and it's not unrelated to your personal story. I think it's actually very related to your personal story, which is why I think your personal story is interesting. Which is I think to get you started, I'm going to start, which is I think we have so much in the church today that is simply ideology, left wing ideology, right wing ideology, that then makes use of theological arguments, not for their own sake, but for the sake of propping up a particular ideology, which at the end of the day is actually simply an offshoot of some kind of secular politics.
Yeah.
MAGA, Trump politics, or left wing LGBTQ politics, one or the other. But what it seems to me is lacking, and I've blogged about this, is Christ. That I
Yes.
mean, the church is supposed to be the face of Christ, to bring Christ to the world. And it seems to me that this is its greatest. I mean, I'm not talking about the sacraments here. I'm talking about the image that she presents. And it doesn't present an image of Christ, it seems to me.
At all. And I mean, I was thinking about this the other day when I was watching, and for me, it always goes to our bishops. God bless them. But
Are you're a Texan, not a Southerner? I once
yeah,
saw a stand-up comic say that Southerners cover up any insult they might make by saying, "Oh, God bless her heart."
I
Oh,
think
she's so
Catholics do.
fat. God bless her heart.
I think Catholics do the same. God bless them, because I really need God to bless them. Like
Yeah. All
a
right.
wake
Yeah.
up call of some
Okay.
kind.
So those damn bishops, God bless their hearts.
I was watching some coverage, not all, but some coverage from their meeting recently, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, do they not know the suffering in the world right now, post COVID, in this country, the fear? I mean, do they not? It's not that I need bishops on TikTok. Please don't get on TikTok and make TikToks, but just like watch the sheep. The sheep are crazy,
Yeah.
you
That's
know?
once
Like,
again walnut brain. That's what
yeah,
we walnut soul. We need shepherds.
and they're sitting around these banquet tables in this nice dining room of some sort. I'm guessing a hotel or whatever. And
Oh, they're all in big city 5-star hotels because that's
yeah,
what they
and
need apparently.
and they're talking about maybe, I mean, maybe theologically important stuff, but like on the ground stuff. Like you have people buying buses to bus women to states that they can get abortions. And no, and while I am 100% anti-abortion, it doesn't solve anything. It's not a solution. But why are there busloads of women willing to do that? You know, it's
Yeah.
not as
Yeah.
easy as, oh, because they don't understand responsibility. You know, that's a cop out for us not having to do the work. the work that Christ gives us. And it's so easy. God, it's like Jesus made it easy. He set it out. Clothe the naked, feed the hungry, give thirsty to the, give water, drink to the thirsty, visit the
Sure. Yeah,
prisoner.
exactly.
I mean, he
It's
lists it. He actually lists it. And we're
yeah,
like, what should we
exactly.
do? What could we do? What could the church do to get people to come to mass? It's like, he gave us the list.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's have a synod on trying to figure out why people don't go to mass anymore. Well,
Uh,
there, as the comic says, there's your sign. Okay. If you need a synod to figure out why people don't like synods, there's your sign. Okay.
I'm not, and of course, it's like everything else. There's some bishops that are better than others. I love Bishop Flores. I think he's amazing. But it's like, my thing is that
Bishop
as
who?
a Flores from,
Oh, Florida. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I love him. I call him Batman. But
As opposed to, there's another bishop in Texas who I don't like.
Strickland, um,
Strickland. Oh,
Tyler,
anyway.
Texas. But
Yeah.
it's like,
Tyler. Yeah.
I just, but even that, okay, so even that, it's like politics, where it's like, you have the Biden lovers who are in these liberal cities like Austin, Texas, and then you have the MAGA people who are like in rural Texas. And so it's like this like, constant tension between these two groups. And even when it comes to our bishops, like, it does not shock me that the bishop in Tyler, Texas is saying the things he's saying on Twitter. It's Tyler, Texas.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and it just
It's like the
shouldn't be that
contrast
way.
between Dallas and Fort Worth, right? Dallas is all like
Yeah,
Manhattan wannabe, and Fort Worth is all Billy Bob Honky Tonk, and
yeah, and it's like our
that's
bishops.
Texas.
I just don't feel like our bishops should, you shouldn't be like, oh yeah, that bishop's in, the Rio Grande Valley, so he's kind to immigrants, and that bishop's in East Texas, so he, panders to racists. Like, I just don't think it should be that predictable.
Yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
it's not a PR move.
Bec-
It is so much better, so much deeper. Yeah.
the thing is, to me, the Second Vatican Council, and everybody writes about the Second Vatican Council, but but they're all wrong. I'm right. But the thing is, this isn't just my opinion. The council was a theological council written for basically other theologians, and it was a Christological council. And what it was saying essentially was, we need to reinterrogate the entirety of the church's tradition and the current church through the lens of a Christological reduction. And that's my view as well. And I keep coming back to this over and over and over again. I am like you, Leticia, I'm a fully Orthodox Catholic. I buy into all of the doctrines and traditions of the church, but I also think that all of those things need to be placed in an entirely new light, in an entirely
Yeah.
new context. Uh,
Yeah. And it
I often
starts,
say, burn it down,
I do too.
burn
I
it
do
down.
too. The way it is right now is not the face of Christ. And I know this because I have belonged to a Catholic space that was the face of Christ. I've seen it. I've seen it in
As have
so
I.
so when I converted and I had the priest that I had, supporting me through that conversion, um, I was heartbroken to learn that that is not normal. That
Yeah,
my conversion story is not how everyone else converts. My RCIA director is probably the best evangelist in modern history. And no one knows his name. His name's no, I mean, people know him, Noe
well,
Rocha,
what
but
is his name? Let's make him known. What's his name?
Noe Rocha. And he has been evangelizing. So he told his testimony for the first time the day I was born, March 15th, 1977. Um, he was a heroin addict. He went to a priest to ask for money to get a score, and the priest told him, "Come back. We're having this class. It's called Jesus is Lord." And no, he came back. He had his conversion over months and over years. And the first time he got up and told his testimony to a group of people of what Jesus had done for him was the day I was born. Um,
Oh,
yeah. And then 33 years later, I walked into the parish hall where he was giving an RCIA class, and he said, God loves you more than you think he does. No matter what you've done or how far you've gone, he's waiting for you. And that changed everything. That's when my conversion began.
It's too bad Anthony couldn't spoken to him.
And you know, one of the things that Anthony wrote in he didn't leave a note, but he had a notebook that I had given him that day to write down goals. Like this is what we're planning. This is what we're gonna do. Like to
Yeah,
write down
yeah.
goals. The one of the things he put in there was God loves me. I know this. No, he taught me.
Oh, okay. So he did talk to him. That's right. I remember that now. It's in the book. Yeah, and it's what that brings up too is how important priests are in the Catholic Church. We talk
Yes.
about the need for a declericalized church, and we do need a declericalized church, but we need a declericalized church in order precisely to reemphasize why the priesthood is so important in its own right, for the right reasons.
Yeah.
We need more lay involvement in the church, obviously, but the Catholic Church is a church oriented around sacraments, and the main one being Eucharist in particular, and you need a priest for that, and for better or for worse, priests are the primary evangelizers in the church. So um
Yeah, we
we
got
need,
have to get them out of politics like that. I
yeah.
remember hearing a story about John Paul II and a priest in South America somewhere that did
Mhm.
something in politics, and Pope John Paul II got off a plane and was like, this is a nope.
It was in Nicaragua, and the priest, I can't think of his name anymore, he wore like a Che Guevara beret and stuff, and he had in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas had taken over the communists.
Yeah.
John Paul visited Nicaragua, and he got off the plane. I know, I was a young man, I was a seminarian when this happens. And John Paul gets off the plane, and this priest actually kneels in front of John Paul and attempts to kiss his ring. And John Paul pushes him away and shakes his fingers. You don't know what he said, but you can tell he's lecturing him, and he's shaking his hands at him like this.
Yeah.
And it sort of later came out that what he was saying was, you have to regularize your relationship with the church, Father. By I mean, this was a guy who was basically, part of a communist government,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can't do that as a priest any more than I would say a priest should be the Secretary of State of the United States. That would be very bad too.
Yeah. And there's good reason for that. And
Yeah.
I just I do want to emphasize, and it's such a time when people see so many negative stories about priests. That's the reason why I put all the stories about my priest in my book too, is because I understand, as a victim of uh, childhood sex abuse, I understand the gravity of what happened. Um, I understand the trauma. I understand the scapegoating. I get it. I do. But there are good priests, and that's what we need. We need more good priests. Like my priests are amazing. And I've had disagreements with them, and that's another thing. They've given me I don't think that I could be as honest with God if I couldn't have been as honest with my priest.
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
because yeah.
what that honesty also constitutes is an insight into I think a real problem in our moral theology. And when I say, we need to present the face of Christ better as a church, don't get me wrong, I am no liberal progressive when it comes to moral theology. I accept all of the church's
Yes.
moral teachings in a very simple, straightforward way, even all the sexual bits. Nevertheless, I do think that our moral theology needs a real revision with regard to how it gets applied pastorally to people. And I think to a certain extent, this is what Pope Francis is trying to do. I don't always agree with the manner in which he does it, but I think this is what he's trying to do. Because it's not a one size fits all cookie cutter pastoral approach here, and I'm not arguing for laxity at all, not at
Yeah.
all, and nor are you. But for I don't know what exactly it is I'm arguing for, but
Realness. There's just a realness.
yeah,
Like my
yeah,
priest, he
yeah,
knew, he heard my first confession. He knew my past. And what he said after my first confession, what my priest said was not he gave me absolution, and then after that he said, have you ever been to therapy? And I laughed because I was like, that's what you're going to tell me? And he was like, he said, I am personally saying, actually he said this before absolution because he couldn't talk to me afterwards, which he explained. um he said, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
maybe you're not as culpable for all of those things. And that's when he explained culpability to me.
Right. Right.
And and so he saw the trauma. He didn't just see the sins, he saw the trauma, and he saw the need to heal that also. It wasn't just absolution, leave my office, you're fine. You know, he saw a
Yeah.
need for something deeper. And I think a lot of times we don't see the need for something deeper. We say like, oh, well, that's a sin, and that's black and white. And yes, it is.
Yeah.
Like you said, like I do agree with everything the church teaches. I know. That's why I became Catholic. The
Yeah.
church's teachings created safety for me. I am one of those sheep that's running around safe and happy and joyful after so much crap happened to me, you know?
Yeah.
It is the church's teachings that give me peace and love and safety. And I want everyone to know that. But I understand why people scoff at it when they see the way it's presented.
Yeah. There are barriers there that have to be overcome. I mean,
Yeah.
John Paul II calls this the law of gradualism, which is you take someone by the hand and softly, 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 you lead them along. You don't
Yeah.
just walk into the living room, throw 10 catechisms at them and say, okay, you've got the truth now. You're on your own.
Good luck.
Right. Well, and the thing is this, the church is in a bind. And I'll grant this, it's in a bind right now, pastorally speaking, because when the culture becomes completely post-Christian and completely secular and completely nihilistic and completely screwed up, um, at one and the same time, the church has to realize that the vast majority of the sinners that come to her, including Catholics themselves, are not really all that culpable for what they're doing because the culture has made them this way. And
It
so you
shouldn't
have
the and shouldn't the bishops be terrified of this? Because they're the ones that are going to face the wrath and judgment.
exactly. Okay. So they know this. They know that their people live in a septic tank and then act like they're shocked when the people show up and they got shit all over them.
Right?
Okay. And so no, 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 no. We have to recognize this. But on the other hand, the bind is that you recognize the need for the law of gradualists, but you can't give into laxity, because as soon as you give into laxity, you're simply tossing those people to that culture. You're simply saying, okay, stay in the septic tank. It's not really a septic tank. We're going to bless and baptize the septic tank. It's who you are. It's your identity. Live there, be there, enjoy it. And you can't do
Be
that
happy.
either. Yeah. So I said earlier, that's one of the issues I have with Pope Francis is I think this is the tightrope he's trying to walk, but I don't think he's always sort of negotiated that properly. And I'll just leave it at that. But that's the bind that we are in today, pastorally speaking, it seems to me.
Yes.
Uh Go
Yes.
ahead.
And as someone who came out of that septic tank and is now fully in love with and committed to the church, is there's nothing that I am prouder to be than a daughter of the church. Nothing.
Yes.
Not a
Yes.
not a mother, not a wife, nothing. Um, and yet I get so much pushback because I don't say
Yes.
things correctly. I don't tell the story with a bow that everything's great.
That's right.
I don't stop talking about racism. I don't stop talking about how abortion is not a solution. You know, so everywhere I go in the churches left to right, I'm not in enough. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm in the church. The church clearly states. And I love John Paul II's audiences of theology of the body. I really wish we could call it something else because it's so much more than that, right? But
Well, it's been, yeah, because it's been misused by people like Christopher West.
right. But I don't think it's a I think sometimes too people want it to bookend it. Like this is the beginning, it starts with love and responsibility and it ends with the last audience. And I don't even think John Paul II felt it that way. I feel like there's so much that you can um dig out, tease out. There's so much in
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, beautiful stuff that this culture would eat up if the church would just freaking do it, you know?
Well, the guy who's really good on this is Michael Waldstein. Mikhail Waldstein. I don't know where he teaches now. He's moved around, but he's done a great series of books on John Paul's theology of the body that brings
Really?
it to, yeah, that brings it to life exactly as you describe it. It's been reduced to a series of Catholic TED Talks, a
I
series of
know.
chastity, puberty,
Which
keep
helped.
your,
I'm not gonna lie, it did help me a lot when I was converting. But then as I started going to
yes,
school and I read the audiences, that's when I realized how much deeper, how much more beautiful, how much more of the story of humanity, who we are, how we're made. Like you want an identity?
yeah,
Read that.
yeah.
Like this is an identity.
To be honest, yeah, I had students that often got mad at me because I was critical of Christopher West and the whole chastity talk thing. Because as a theologian, I understood what the theology of the body really was. And so I
Yeah.
saw that as a kind of, wait a minute, no, no, no. But I do acknowledge that those talks did have an impact on a certain generation of young people. And so I do have to acknowledge that. But I do think, though, that it's limited. It's like prayer and praise
Yes.
music. All right. Prayer and praise music has its place. It brings, but I mean, dear God in heaven, I know so many students that were into prayer and praise music that are now off in la la land, and
Yeah.
I mean, not
Because
very
it's all
Catholic anymore at
icing.
all. As soon as life really hit them, then
Yes.
they realize that the angelism that's involved in both the theology of the body. Oh, wait a minute. Sex really isn't an image of the Trinity. It's a lot of, you know, it's a lot of animalistic groping and grabbing and,
Yeah, and that's my thing is like, but what people fail to see too is like, what was it about Christopher West that was successful? Because what, like you're saying, it wasn't the theology because there was none. It's like all
oh,
icing, no substance, you know? And but what was successful was his frankness and his honesty. And it's like
yeah,
you can do that and not let go of the substance. And I think that's the tightrope Pope Francis is trying to walk. But like you say, I think I personally I feel as if Pope Francis I kind of feel like this is going to sound really crazy, but I feel the same way about Pope Francis as I did when Obama was elected. Like they had so many great ideas and so many great intentions, but then like actually doing it once you're in the job is a whole other,
radically different.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was in London when Obama was elected president. I was visiting my daughter who was in school there, and it was like the Messiah had been elected, according to the people in London, and the Americans I met there were on cloud nine. Oh my God, the Messiah has come to
And I think it
Washington.
makes their job even harder, right? Because then
It
they
does.
start off with this huge, expectation that's unrealistic and never going to happen.
But then,
And
yeah,
then,
exactly. Because as
yeah.
soon as I saw that when Obama put together his economics team, it was a bunch of Goldman Sachs executives,
And it's
and
this the problem with,
oh my God, it's going to be business as usual.
and that's my thing. It's like there's the common sense of, and this happened with Trump too, where it's like, why? I mean, I remember going home to my small town and sitting in a taqueria and hearing everyone talk about how great Trump was. And I just was like, the man is from New York City. He's a real estate billionaire. He's never driven, owned, or even probably been in a four-wheel pickup truck. Like, what is wrong with you
Yeah,
people? It was like
yeah.
aliens took over everyone I knew because the people I knew would
They were
never.
pod people. Remember
Yeah,
the old 1950s movie, The Invasion of the
yeah.
Pod People?
Yeah,
They
and that
looked like
happened.
themselves, but they were aliens.
Yes, and that happens to Catholics in that they like gave up. You know, I
I have to
love.
admit, I mean, I'm a Dorothy Day Catholic, as you know,
Yeah,
Catholic work,
yeah.
and so I don't vote. I don't
Me
vote.
neither. I'm not.
and
I
and it's not because I'm apolitical. I'm just political in a different way, and I think voting doesn't matter. I really don't think it does. And so, but I have to admit, I had a certain guilty pleasure when Trump beat Clinton, simply because Clinton represented the establishment, and Trump kind of, sort of, in at least in a political sense, represented the anti-establishment. Even though Trump is a swamp creature through and through, in a lot of other ways. I hated Trump, and I still hate Trump, but I think I hated Hillary even more. It's not because she's a woman; it's just because she's actually not a woman. I don't know what she is. She's like a drone. She's some
different
sort of
swamp creature. They're
robot.
just two different swamp creatures, and it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
and I just and I that's my thing. It's like I love Catholicism because it's so deeply intelligent. And I don't mean that you have to have a bachelor's degree in philosophy. I got one because I couldn't stop reading footnotes. But I also didn't know
Yeah.
what the heck they were talking about. So I was like, I'm gonna go to school and figure this out, right? But but so much of that deep intelligence, that deep knowledge was lost in the last 6 years. I just feel like it just was like
Yeah, yeah.
what happens, you know?
Well, not just in our politics, Leticia, but I think also in our church.
Yeah.
Uh, that we've witnessed over the past, I don't know, not just 10 years, 50 years, or whatever, is a real dumbing down of the internal culture of the church, that we can't have conversation anymore. And I really think that you just said it, the intelligence of the Catholic Church and her tradition. I think there's an anti-intellectualist strain that runs through
Yeah.
American culture. And I really think that things like philosophy and theology are extremely important to get right in the Catholic Church. But it's the very thing nobody wants to talk about in the church right now.
Yeah, I know. And it's actually the thing that irritates me the most about Catholic mom blogs is that whenever I mention
Yeah,
anything to do with philosophy, it's this trend or fad or whatever, or a common thing to say like, "Oh, I can't read that philosopher. It makes my eyes glaze over." And I'm just like, you can't not read Augustine and be Catholic. Like in my opinion, like you can disagree with him, but you can't
yeah.
like just not read him, not know what he said. Like you can't
Or
just not
you
read the
can at least
gospel.
say, I don't have time to read Augustine. Well, if that's the case, then stop writing your blog. All right. And just say, look, I don't have time for anything except, getting my kids to school or whatever. But you're
Yeah,
right. For
you
someone to go
can't,
out there and say, I'm going to write a blog, I'm going to be a Catholic out there, but I don't really have time to read any of that.
yeah, total foundational Catholicism. Can't get into it.
I
But I'm
don't
gonna
got no
write,
time for them, their scriptures and the church fathers.
but I'm gonna write a
No
blog
time for
that's
that.
all about Catholicism and how to be a good Catholic. And I'm just like, you
That's right.
can't be a good Catholic if you don't read the foundational texts.
I'm glad you brought up Augustine too. Poor Augustine, he's just taken on the nose because he just everybody hates him about the sex stuff. But and I guess original sin and Pelagianism and all that. But I love Augustine.
I do too.
Don't you love Augustine? I love Augustine,
He's so
especially
dramatic.
yeah, the Confessions, the City of God. It's just all great. We're kind of meandering now, but that's okay. We've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes.
Oh, I could talk to you forever, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If we were in a bar having some, whiskey and beers and stuff, it would be one of those nights where my wife. I wish my wife were here. She's actually going to be here in about 2 hours. But we could have done a joint. And we can get Stacy. Next time we'll do this. We'll do Stacy and my wife Carrie and you and I. We can sit
Oh, that would be great.
and talk. But we probably should wrap this up because people do have a limited attention span for these things. It is an hour and 40 minutes, but I don't necessarily want to have to. I mean, this is one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had at any of these. Part of it's just because I've always wanted to talk to you, and
Yeah.
that I've been following you on Facebook for such a long time, and then I read your book. I was just intrigued by the title. At first it was like, "Oh, Our Lady of Hot Messes." That's a great title for a book, and I thought, well, that's better than the Infant of Prague, which freaks me out. So, as people know, watching my videos, Barbie, Barbie, But anyway, that's irreverent. I know lots of people have a devotion to the infinite Prague, so I just should shut up. But what to me it sort of symbolizes a certain approach to things. But I did like your book, Our Lady of Hot Messes. I thought it was a great book. Maybe I can have you on again so we could talk about more church kind of stuff. But before we do go, I do want to, and still staying on the theme of church and those sorts of things. I do want to ask your opinion about the sexual abuse crisis in the church, because you were sexually abused as a child, not by a priest, by
Yeah.
another adult. I have my own views on that, and I've expressed those. What are your thoughts on the sex abuse crisis in the church?
I honestly think that it is what is the problem with all abuse, and what predators look for is um vulnerable people who are in unsafe spaces are easy pickings, you know? And
Yeah.
I think, and I've said this before, but I think that the thing that's going to light the match that burns the church down is going to be that when our bishops realize that PR statements don't matter.
Oh, so true.
Yeah.
So true.
They've
That
relied on them for so long. They have absolutely no idea how social media works. They have no idea what's happening on the ground. And those PR statements, no one
yes.
even reads them anymore.
I think it's Leticia. I think it's even worse than the PRC. Have you gone through the Virtus training and that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Uh, we have to do it in my. I'm an adult server in my parish. We go to an ordinariate, Anglican ordinariate parish, Catholic, and I'm an adult server. But in order to do that, I have to rub shoulders with young, altar boys. And so I had to do the Virtus training. My wife runs the homeschooling cooperative at our place, so she had to do the Virtus training. We've done it before. Um, a bigger exercise in simple bureaucratic butt covering I've never seen in my entire life.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
complete irrelevance. It doesn't
Yeah.
address, it doesn't solve anything. And yet it's a pain in the rear that you have these hoops you have to jump through. And it's directed at lay people who are not the problem.
Right. And also, again, it goes back to this whole business of PR and optics, right?
Yeah.
So now that
Yeah.
I work in corporate America, not just corporate America, but government office, I
Yeah.
see the same kind of tactic. And it's like the church ought to not use these tactics because these
Yes.
are people. But so there was a kid that was at my parish. She was in the bathroom and was approached by a man. And I can't exactly remember what happened, but the kid went and told his mom. The parish called the cops. They did everything quote unquote right, right? Then that Sunday, when they were expressing to the parish that this happened and that they took care of it and they were cooperating with authorities, then the priest decided to have a homily where he scapegoated what happened to the devil. And it's like, yes, the devil is evil and out to get us, but you can't just spiritually bypass everything that this kid's now going to live through by saying, oh, it's the devil, and the devil wants to tear down the church. And that's the reason why he's tempted these people and these priests to do
Yeah.
all this stuff. It's like, well, theologically, I understand where you're going with that. As a layperson sitting in the pew, that just sounds like
Yeah. It sounds like
crap.
caca pants.
Yeah, it
It's
sounds
caca
like
pants.
crap, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and I felt the same way about, Bishop Barron's letter to the suffering. I mean, I saw better response in that than I have in anything else, but I still saw that kind of thing where it's like we know it's sin. We know it's sin. We know it's the devil. We know it's evil. Like we all know, but like what are
We
we
get that.
doing?
We get
Yeah.
that.
What are we doing
I'm
practically?
Bishop Barron's a close friend of, I'm not a close friend. He's a friend of mine. I love what he does. But and that letter was good, but I agree with you. It was like boilerplate. It was just kind of
Yeah.
still
It was
it was
better than anything else I've
it was
read.
better than most, but it was boilerplate. And that's the problem with the whole church's response. It's a boilerplate response created by a bureaucracy beholden to insurance companies and lawyers.
Yes. and all of that, that's the reason why God is going to allow whatever's about
Yeah.
to happen. Because, and I'm
Yeah.
not saying that as like a prophetic thing, I'm just saying that as a logical thing. Like looking at it, looking at the landscape, looking at what's happening, it's just, it's
Yeah.
only a matter of time. I mean, people are leaving. I talk to people all
Yeah.
the
Oh,
time
yeah.
who are like, I love the church, but I can't stay.
Who can
And
stay in this thing anymore because of this? Because, I
yeah,
mean, I stay, well, where the hell am I going to go? Like the
yeah,
Quovenus story earlier. Where are you going, Lord? Well, I'm going back to, Rome to be crucified. I'm going back to Jerusalem to be crucified again. But anyway, Rome to be crucified again. I'm sorry. And and the thing is that we just have a church that just doesn't seem to get this Christological need to show this crucified Christ in this way. And these we talked about earlier, we were talking about honesty and the inability to be honest. We have a church that just seems to be completely unable to do this examination of conscience and to be brutally honest with itself and to repent. I mean, 2002 is when the Boston Globe story about Gagan hit
yeah,
the fan and the whole sex abuse thing hit the fan. 2002, and then, or maybe it was before that, and then maybe it was the Dallas Charter that was in 2002, whatever. uh and now we get all this talk about, oh, zero tolerance and virtues training, and there aren't that many cases anymore. And then we just read, oh, there was this Jesuit, Father Rupnik, whatever
yeah,
his name was,
yes, yes,
oh, like, he absolved people in the confessional that he was having sex with. And but the Jesuits took away his excommunication for that because he was repentant, but they didn't defrock him. And then he gives a bunch of Lenten lectures to the Pope and the Curia and so on. Nobody said boo about the fact that he essentially sexually abused like half the nuns that were under his charge and so forth. And that wasn't just in 1980 shimmy shang. This was very, very recently.
yeah. And I think that that's the thing. Like, and why is this the thing that they all like? I love Pope Francis. I love Pope John Paul II. I love Pope Benedict. But like, Pope Benedict is a great teacher. Like his books, I feel like
Oh,
you
yeah.
you could just go through his writing and get a theology degree. Like it's
No
so like
doubt.
boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a great teacher, great theologian. And yet, blind spot on this one. It's like, why this one thing? Pope Francis, feed the poor and smell like your sheep and mess
Yeah.
things up. It's like, and then this, he's like, I don't know.
Pope John Paul too.
Yeah.
Be not afraid. Launch into the deep water. And then he Maciel and McCarrick and
Why is
yeah.
this the one thing? Like, I just don't understand. And I also, I mean, but again, I every time I see one of these stories, you can clearly see where the PR stuff started. You know, the Steubenville story, where it's like
Oh
you can see
God.
where
Don't
people
you?
just care about the optics. And it's like at some point we have to stop caring about the optics and we have to care about the people, right? The people. And not just the people who come to the pews and put money in the basket, like the people. I had this conversation with a pastor recently where he was talking about why people weren't coming back to church after COVID. And I was like, but why do you care if they come into your church and sit in your pews? You are a pastor to everyone in your community, even the ones who don't come sit in your pews. Why don't you go out and pastor people and see what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah.
Radical idea, sir. I kind of know of someone who did this once where he went to the people.
Well, yeah. And that doesn't mean he's got to be walking around the shopping mall saying, "Hey, have you heard about Jesus?" All
Right?
right.
It's like have lunch, have dinner, ask people how they're doing, volunteer at the shelter, volunteer, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah. Yeah. Make your rounds at places that matter like that. And there are priests that do that. And I have a good priest friend, an old seminary buddy of mine, because I was in the seminary. Father Mike Kerper, he's a priest in Nashua, New Hampshire. He's about 70 years old now. But he just opened a like a homeless shelter
nice.
attached to his parish. And he's inspired by, it's called, the Dorothy Day Shelter or something like that. And then they have a coffee shop in the shelter. It's called the Day Cafe in Dorothy Day. And it's become enormously successful. Look at all these homeless people or just the working poor. that show up there for the free coffee and the donuts and so forth. And most of them are not Catholic. Most of them, are not in those pews on Sunday. And yet there's my friend, Father Mike Kerper, over there every day at the Day Cafe, ministering to
Yeah.
those people. And that's the face of Christ.
And
That's the
maybe
church I love.
and maybe that's the key, is what you're saying. Maybe we all, priests and laity alike, have forgotten what it looks like to minister to others.
That's it. Okay. So he may not get 5% of those people to end up in his pews, but the witness he is giving in
Yes.
so doing and doing all of that bolsters the faith of those who are in the pews to then want to do great things. We don't, and this is my hobby horse, the universal cult to holiness. We don't inspire people in the pews to
Yes.
aspire to holiness,
I
because we
know.
don't image that ourselves, those of us who are sort of in the church as leaders. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not a clerical leader, so forth, but I'm a theologian, all that. I'm and I feel like that's one of the reasons why I started a Catholic worker farm. I just felt like a hypocrite.
Yeah, same. And I think, and this isn't one last thing. We also strip it away from our saints. We make our saints into
Yeah.
these like porcelain dolls. Like I remember reading Saint Catherine Siena, and that, she had all these different kinds of people that followed her around, and they all knew about her, and she ministered to all these people in her community. And then my favorite story was someone brought her a little girl who was possessed by a demon, and she was trying to run out the back door. And like, this is what, once you like start evangelizing people and start telling people about, just start ministering to people. So I don't even I hardly tell anyone about Jesus anymore. But when they hear I'm Catholic, they're like, oh wow, and so she's trying to run out the back door, and they're like, you can't, Catherine, you can't run. This little girl needs you, or this child needs you. And she was like, I have plenty of demons of my own. I don't need to wrestle anyone else's. I mean, she finally does come
Well,
back and pray over this child, but it's like, that's exactly what it feels like, right? Sometimes when God puts people in your path and you're like, get me out of
I'd be afraid to do something like that, just because, like, if I ever, recognize the demon, I'd say, "Oh, I know you. You've been around. You're a little too much." So,
1987.
yeah, I know you. Oh, I've seen you. Have we met before? Yeah. All right. Look, so it was like 20 minutes ago. I said we
Yeah.
sort of need to wrap this up. Like I said, I could talk to you for hours, Leticia. I think this has not only been an informative but kind of a fun conversation. And so I thank you for coming on here. Hopefully we can actually come on again now that people know your story.
Yeah.
We can just talk straight up. Here's why the church is screwed up, and here's how we fix it. That
That
kind
would
of
be so
stuff.
fun.
So thank you so much for this for this conversation, for coming on today.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm all verklempt. I don't know what it is, but I'm doing
It
my voice.
happens.
Okay, so thanks everybody for watching or listening, and until next time, thanks a lot. Bye bye.